and show here in New York.
I'm going to riffle the cards. And when I riffle the cards...
Card faster and farther than anyone in the world. Peruse his book, Learned Pigs and Fireproof Women, and you discover that he's a scholar whose subjects include con artists, magicians, and other unusual entertainers. Ask around New York City, and you find that one of the hottest tickets in town is his one-man show at the Second Stage Theater. There, armed only with a deck of cards, Ricky dazzles audiences with a unique evening of magic he calls Ricky Jay and his 52 assistants.
You know, there's an old vaudeville story that somebody used the billing of his name and 52 assistants, and when he played Buffalo, they had booked 53 hotel rooms for him. So it's, you're not the first person to think cards were not the assistants.
In fact, Ricky, during your show, you perform a lot of effects, but you also really give a narration of the history of
Digitation?
Thank you. I mean, do you consider yourself a historian as well as a sleight of hand artist?
I do seriously study the history of the art, and I write about the history of magic and unusual entertainers.
You know, it's amazing to me just looking through your book on magic and on various sleight of hand artists. And what an incredibly rich history there is there that many people aren't aware of. For example, the man from Nuremberg who didn't have any appendages, but fathered, I think, what did you say, 14 children?
14
so he did.
Children.
He did have certainly one that was working quite well. But did you find that incredibly fascinating and eye-opening when you began to delve into the history of all this?
It is. I mean, that man, Matthew Buchinger, the little man of Nuremberg, is a real favorite. I mean, there's a great poem written about him, a broadside poem that I may have the only copy of, that says, "See, gallants, wonder and behold this German of imperfect mold. No legs, no arms, no feet, no hands, yet all that art can do commands." I mean, it's just incredibly rich. So here's a man with no arms, using these sort of flippers to move a calligraphic pen and do the most remarkable calligraphy, and then play 6 or 7 musical instruments, dance the hornpipe with no feet, do trick bowling shots, and then perform with cards and dice and do the cups and balls. I mean, it's just extraordinary.
Ricky Jay's love of history and magic began at the tender age of 4 in Brooklyn, where he got his start as a child magician with the encouragement of his grandfather.
I did television as early as the age of 7, and I'm sure I was one of those horrible little children that run around and do performances, you know, that adults want to slap silly and should.
And other kids
as I
probably,
would now.
As other kids probably wanted to do, too.
That, you know.
What program were you on when you were 7?
I was on a program called Time for Pets, in which I had second billing to a St. Bernard, which was considerably larger. It started an enormous problem for me being underbilled to animals, Shamu the killer whale, and there were any number of other animals in my sordid past.
How do you learn new effects?
I can show you. I was studying crickets not long ago, and I found that you can learn from the cricket patience. Yes! And from understanding patience, one can build a certain effect. For instance, from a baby, you can learn, you know how a baby holds your finger very tightly and then releases it almost instantaneously? Well, from the baby, I've learned something about how to take a playing card, which needs to be held tightly when you're going to throw it with accuracy, and then it's released sort of instantaneously. And from watching the baby, one gets a certain sense of that. You know. And then from the duck, one learns inquisitiveness. I think that's the key ingredient that you can learn from the duck.
Hey,
so
check that out.
Using all these elements, one is able to combine them into a magical effect. May I show you an effect that I worked up using these things?
You just happen to have your 52 assistants with you.
I'm never without my assistants. Actually, these are different assistants than I thought I would be using, but I currently have many of them. Here's what I'd like you to do. I'm going to look away, but as I do, I'm going to riffle the cards. And when I riffle the cards, I'm going to ask you to stop at any point.
Stop.
Say stop, right? All right, so you can see a card, and hopefully the camera can see it as well.
I don't think the camera can. Can the camera see that card?
Yes.
Okay, the camera can. Okay.
All right, so you won't forget that. Now what I would do is actually make use of many of the techniques we talked about. The technique of patience, the technique of inquisitiveness, the technique of being able to grab something and then let it go. Would you be so kind as to name the actual card you selected?
6 of clubs.
Good. And that is indeed the 6 of clubs.
How'd you do that? I'm not allowed to ask that, am I?
You can ask, I'm just not allowed to answer.
That's pretty darn good.
Thanks.
You're welcome. And if that left you wanting more, you may want to inspect Ricky's new limited edition magazine, Jay's Journal of Anomalies.